Hello, and welcome to Borshoff's monthly video and podcast. I'm your host, Justin Whitowich, CMO at Borshoff. At Borshoff, our agency's purpose is to make meaningful connections that help brands make a real impact. And we've refocused this show to celebrate a little bit more on this purpose. So welcome to the first episode of The Mindful Bullhorn. In each episode, guests will share how they're connecting with their audiences in unexpected ways, using their voices and platforms to cut through the noise by being mindful of the needs of their audiences that shape commerce and culture for the better. And that is why we're so excited to have Richard Worsham, CEO and founder of Janus Motorcycles, as our first guest. We're thrilled to share Richard's and Janus's brand story about cultivating real connections with Janus riders. Let's do it. Thanks, Richard. Thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, really excited to have this conversation and jump in to learn more about Janus and all the great things that you're doing to have an impact. So first question for you, what's your first memory of motorcycles?
First memory of motorcycles? Probably we lived in an old farm growing up. Well, that's one way of describing it, but it had a barn with some dilapidated vehicles in it. And one of those was an old 1970s, I would assume, moped. And some guys that were working with us helped put that back together again. And I rode it around and crashed in the gravel. And that was about it for quite a few years. Yeah. But it was fun.
That's awesome.
It was kind of an exhilarating experience.
Yeah. And so was that memory part of the inspiration to eventually want to create your own motorcycle company?
No, I don't think it was. No, it was I wasn't really that interested in two-wheeled I saw them as kind of precarious and dangerous.
Yeah.
And I was really interested in historic cars. My father took us to some historic races and got me very interested in the design of the cars. And as he was an architect, I was always exposed to kind of orthographic drawing and sections.
Yeah.
And so I kind of went a little different than, I did draw some buildings, but I was really interested in car design. And so I really kind of pursued that as a child. And it wasn't until really college that I decided to buy a vintage moped.
Yeah.
And it was not a motorcycle, it was this kind of more approachable, lightweight nature of the moped, the fact that I could work on it myself, that appealed to me.
Okay.
And so that was my in with motorcycle. Two-wheeled travel, I guess.
So I know you studied architecture at Notre Dame and ended up staying in northern Indiana. So around what time did you really decide that you wanted to found a motorcycle company?
About 3 months after I graduated with an architecture degree.
Okay, yeah.
I had been working over the summers. When I moved out here, I unwisely, without knowledge of the climate of northern Indiana, only brought a vintage moped as my means of transportation at Notre Dame, and quickly realized that wasn't going to fly and started taking public transportation. But I met a local fellow who had a repair shop and just fell in love with the community that grew up around that repair shop and the idea of riding together and working on these bikes. And I started working, instead of getting an internship in architecture over the summers, I started repairing vintage bikes.
Nice.
And so it kind of got distracted into it.
Yeah. When you're conceiving of creating Janus Motorcycles, right, there's so many motorcycles and motorcycle brands out there. What did you want Janus to become that you thought wasn't available with some of the other motorcycles that were already out in the market?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, it really was, I'm going to go right off of what we just talked about, those vintage mopeds. And I guess I'll just say real quick what a vintage moped is. It's not a scooter. It's it looks like a motorcycle, except it has pedals. And it's these really dorky two-strokes many of them imported in the 1970s. And they were all European, real funky looking. And there was a an immediacy with them. You could, well, not only could you work on them, you kind of had to because they were always breaking down.
Right.
But they really fostered this kind of idea of working on them together, sharing knowledge of, because you had a handbook, but there was really not much else to go off of, and there was certainly no shops really that would, for most people that specialized in it. And so that idea of riding together, wrenching together on a machine that you could understand and that had this kind of charm to it in its own right.
Right.
You kind of fell in love with the machine itself. That was something that's what got me interested in motorcycles. It wasn't Harley Davidsons and making a lot of noise, or Ducatis and going really fast, or what many of the reasons that you often think of why people get into bikes.
Yeah.
It was that aspect of it. And so when we founded Janus, it was really an attempt to apply or reapply that kind of charm and beauty and engagement back into motorcycles.
Yeah.
And that we had really, we felt absolutely no interest in what was currently available.
Yeah, no, that's great.
in motorcycles.
So you talk about that charm and that engagement, being embedded into the motorcycles and the spirit of riding a Janus motorcycle. I know a lot of your language and what you're very proud of at Janus is how Janus draws on the Northern Indiana spirit of manufacturing. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean, and how does that come to life in everything that you're doing at Janus?
Yeah, I mean, it is something that's absolutely central to what we're doing, but it's something that we just kind of backed into by virtue of me being in Indiana.
Okay.
I didn't move to Indiana to start a motorcycle company. Obviously, for starting to get an architecture degree, but it just so happened that there we were, and Northern Indiana, especially Elkhart County and the surrounding counties, where Goshen, Indiana, is the county seat, is the capital of the RV industry, and that has a huge effect on the fact that Janus can do what we do. There's a incredibly diverse manufacturing ecosystem, you could say, where I talk to people about this, that you really can't go a mile without passing some sort of small shop that is doing something with machining, powder coating, laser cutting, welding. It's just, there's so many options. Yeah. And so that is something that allowed us to do what we do. And it's also something that from day one, sometimes I'm giving tours, I can live it vicariously again and just remind myself that we're working with 20 minutes away, this guy is making this part for us. 5 minutes away, this guy's welding up an exhaust. It's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah.
And of course, we're very proud of it. It's also a big part of our, I think a lot of our customers find attractive to what we're doing. It really plays well with our whole message. Yeah.
So it sounds like in that area, you've really fostered a whole community of people who are supporting each other. How have you found that to just make a real impact on the terms of the growth of your company and being able to accelerate that with that community there at your disposal?
Well, I kind of talked about just the diversity of those shops, and I think that really it's just the fact that you have so many options. Yeah. And it's something that's already, we certainly, I think, contribute to that ecosystem, but we are by no means claim that we started it. It's been going on for many, many years, and it's the fact that you can have you have 3 different machine shops that you can work with. For this part, this way, this part's that way. Now we're starting to bring some stuff in-house. It all kind of, I guess maybe to answer your question, the best way would be the fact that trying to do this in some other places, you'd run into the problem of, hey, we need to go to a big shop. Yeah. And they're gonna say, you want how many of those? We don't work with you unless you order 100,000. And that's never been a problem. Yeah. We can always say, hey, here's an order for 25 of those or 5 of them, and then scale up. And as we grow, do we go to another shop, or they grow with us? That's actually probably a good example is the shop that does most of our fabrication for us man, we've grown up with them. It's pretty amazing.
That's awesome. Sounds like just a very supportive community up there, all working together for the common good. I love that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I know that the craftsmanship that goes into the bike is incredibly important for ultimately the machines that you produce and part of the culture and the brand. You also talk about being very proud to globally source your parts. Talk about why that is and how that benefits you and the riders.
Yeah, so we've just been talking all about this hyper-local manufacturing, and it's kind of an interesting dichotomy that we do use, and we're talking like local, I'm talking like literally like some things 5 minutes away. Then there are other parts that come literally from the other side of the world. And the reason that this makes so much sense for us is that we, in the grand scheme of things, are pretty new on the scene. I mean, we've been around for over 10 years now, but in the motorcycle world, there's some brands that have been over 100 years. And we like to go to the experts when it comes to specialty components. So, for example, let's say brake systems. We use Brembo. That's an Italian company. I'm sure if we spent decades, we could come up with a really good brake too. But for the time being, we're focusing on motorcycles. And so we go to Brembo for brakes. We go to Icon for shock absorbers. We go to, our engine is manufactured in mainland China. They've been making that same engine for 40 years. So we know that these are components that we can use in our bikes. And we can use the highest quality parts that have been made by people that know what they're doing.
Smart.
What we know how to do is making chassis and beautiful motorcycles and suspension systems.
So just building on that, making really beautiful motorcycles, and to you, what makes a Janus motorcycle so special, especially within the context of how Janus and its riders really celebrate form over function?
That's a good one. I think that one of the things that our bikes do differently, and that especially maybe in retrospect, I can look back on from day one, we didn't necessarily have the vocabulary. We've been developing it as we go, but it almost goes past that dichotomy that you mentioned of form and function. And I think that maybe early on I would have said, we prize form over function, or it's a balance of the two. And I think maybe what we're kind of realizing now even more than that is that a motorcycle in general has some advantages over other machines in that it's a thing and not a device, or maybe it's not an appliance. So, and cars have kind of become appliances. It's a box, and there's all these wires, and you don't know how it works. You don't know how to fix it necessarily, and it doesn't have to look very good. And a motorcycle, because it's exposed, it has to look good. And so it's kind of inoculated against that deviceification or application of things. And so I think what we've been doing and what makes Janus different is that we've been basically doubling down on that and saying, what can we do to make this more of a thing? And what I mean by that is, like, it's not necessarily practical. It's something that we do for us. We ride a motorcycle not necessarily to get from one place to another. It's certainly not the most efficient way. We do it because it does something. It has the possibility of transforming us, and so that's really what we've been trying to do with our bikes. Is they're beautiful, yes, but they're beautiful because it's all kind of tied together in this thing that it demands your attention. And you cannot be distracted from that.
I love that.
And yes, you're right. Form and function have to be balanced in there. And form is, on a motorcycle, is very, very important. I mean, at the end of the day, it's an engine with two wheels.
Absolutely. So for the audience who's the most attracted to that and celebrating everything that you just said, who do you find your most loyal customers and riders to be? And how do you cultivate your ongoing relationships and communications with them?
Another great question. That's something we've really been focusing on more recently is, who are our customers? Like, obviously we ask that question anytime you're in business, but we kind of call them like our super customers. Like, well, who are these people, and what are they? What is there something that's typical of them? And there's not. They used to say of Honda, you meet the nicest people on Honda, and we've kind of reclaimed that and said you meet the weirdest people on a Janus.
I love it.
But there are some generalities, and there's, I think, are people that are interested in beauty, and they're interested in riding for more than just getting, good fuel economy or something like that.
Right.
Often our typical rider will have more than one motorcycle in the garage. They will have maybe a Harley Davidson or a Ducati, or they're returning to something that got them into riding in the first place. And I think that's maybe even, that might trump all of them, is most riders start off on something small, or they should at least, I think.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point they remember, I used to have more fun on that little Trail 90 than I've had on this big other bike. We listen a lot. We've been listening a lot more to our customers, and I think this rambling idea is that Janus is something that the fact that it kind of demands that engagement, and that you're doing it for more than just getting from one place to another. We call that rambling.
Yeah.
And the kind of people that are interested in that are first of all, those are kind of that's automatically motorcyclists, are more in that genre. But our customers are even they're a subset, a niche within that. Yeah.
So you're talking a little bit about some of the feedback that you get from your riders, how their experience makes them feel. Was that how you intended it to be, or is it a bit of a surprise in terms of the feedback you get from your riders, and just the feelings, the emotions that they get when they're out on the street riding a Janus motorcycle?
I mean, the short answer is no. I think that we have not been surprised. I mean, surprised just with the force of how much they are captured by that. But the longer response would be that it's kind of what our expectations and what we think has changed as we've grown.
Okay.
And as we kind of look back at, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, as we look back at the first model we came out with or something, it's easier now. We kind of developed a vocabulary to talk about it, and in that sense, we have changed over the years and adapted more toward to fit what our customer is. But I think really one of the things that makes us different, the fact that we're different is because we don't necessarily listen too hard. We this is a product that is just going to be different, and we're going to find some people that find that appealing. Now, obviously, you have to kind of adjust that a little bit. But for example, the first bike we came out with did not fit any category of what we thought. We didn't do any market research, really, and so I think people really find that interesting. That it's something that we're doing a little differently, and kind of celebrating the fact that we are not only kind of a little bit of an underdog or a small new kid on the block, but that we're doing it in opposition to this idea of what the modern vehicle device has kind of become. Yeah. And so it's been helpful to kind of create this or highlight maybe a dichotomy that or a trend in the larger automotive realm that certainly was there, was present in our minds when we started. I can say that with sincerity, right? The moped, really, that's why I got into it. But it's easier to kind of see, and it's easy, as we grow, it's nice to be able to put it in words that the customer can actually use too, to describe maybe why they got it, maybe whether it's to their spouse or to their buddy. I have a 2500 cc, whatever, and I got one that's only 250, and it goes, it's 14 horsepower. Why? And that's been maybe part of how we have listened, and maybe a little bit surprising. It's maybe sometimes it's just surprising to see that the positive or agreement from the customer.
That's awesome. So you kind of got into it a little bit, but how would you describe, I mean, if you had to describe, if you could put a value proposition for your brand, for Janus, into the minds of your customers and your prospects, what would that short little phrase be? Like, what is the true differentiator for Janus?
Differentiator for Janus. That's a good one. Well, probably, I mean, very much like kind of what we've been talking about it is that this is a vehicle that is not, it's intentionally not efficient. It's inefficient.
Uh-huh.
I mean, so what I mean by that is that, you know, there are more practical ways to get from one place to another.
Yeah.
We celebrate a level of inefficiency or of impracticality, because the reason that I would argue, at least in the United States, the reason that people buy motorcycles is not to get from one place to the other. You can get a very practical car for, you know, we can all get, you know, it's something that makes more sense. You can drive in the snow, you can drive in the rain, but instead, most people ride a motorcycle and they'll give you all these different explanations. They like the freedom, they like the wind in their hair, but what they're actually getting at, I argue, is this impractical joy of doing what they want to do, going wherever they want to go. And the motorcycle, because it's all exposed, like we talked about, like they can understand it, they feel like they have a level of agency. Mm-hmm. And there's a level of risk involved. I won't sugarcoat it. You know, you are riding on two wheels with cars around you. All that is something that is very powerful, and I think that's what we have started describing as rambling, and it's that inefficient kind of. I talk about it like it's a clematis climbing a stone wall. It kind of just does its thing. It's organic. Uh-huh. It rambles, and it's in that activity that you actually are transformed through that. So rambling is something that you don't do you do it for what it does for you.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. I mean, that's to capture all of that and put it out into the world. I mean, that's something that a lot of people can identify with, and you know, it's all about the emotion and the freedom, and it's a really good description there. So the whole notion of rambling and that spirit you just described, how do you bring that to life in building an employee culture that embraces that and puts that heart and soul and that feeling of everything they're doing into their work and building these bikes?
Wow, that's good. That's a good question. Well, we're situated, like we said earlier, in this manufacturing world, and a county, and there's like everything, there's good and bad sides to everything, and there's a sort of like to take that kind of analogy of the automobile, the device or the appliance. There's a way of manufacturing that's very automatic and automated, mass production. And that happens on all scales, but what we try to do with our production is foster this kind of like very hands-on, craft-oriented culture of manufacturing. So we don't have an assembly line, even though we're producing, you know, multiple bikes a week. It starts as a chassis, a frame, and one assembly hand will take it from that all the way through to the finished bike. Now, there's lots of other people involved in getting all the parts together, but they have a lot of ownership over what they're doing, and we also don't. We're very. It's a very creative place to work, and you can. We kind of demand a level of agency, just like what you do when you ride a motorcycle. You know, there's only 20 of us, and we're making hundreds of bikes a year, and so everybody has to wear many different hats, and it's up to the employee to keep up. But I think that also breeds a lot of pride and ownership that is really remarkable. I mean, just a plug for the team. I mean, it's an incredible group of people that I'm. Incredibly, I realize every day privileged to be able to work with.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds just like a very passionate group, a group that wants to come to work every single day and help Janus be impactful and embrace that spirit and rambling and put that craft into their work every day. It's really special.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
So again, we've been talking a lot about the spirit of rambling and the inefficiency intentionally around the design of the bikes and what that does for people and how that captures a certain feeling and emotion for them. What are you doing externally in your marketing and any of your brand assets and language on your website, your content, your blogs? How are you trying to bring that to life and how in your outreach to your customers and try and get prospects to really see the value of Janus and maybe a way that they don't view the motorcycle category in general?
Yeah, it's a challenge because we kind of talked about it earlier. The motorcycle market for decades now has been dominated by this obsession with power, weight, speed, noise. And our bikes are low power, quiet, very lightweight, and they don't go very fast. So we're on the opposite end of the court from everybody.
Right.
So we also talked a little bit earlier about kind of that category and defining that category that we're creating this category of a new kind of motorcycle. I mean, it isn't necessarily new in the last 100 years, but nobody's been doing it in the last 40. So creating a vocabulary for not just for us, but for the customer to be able to define what they're seeing. Like they're seeing this thing and they're like, I'll say this. Most people when they see a Janus, they're like, that's cool. Yeah. Everybody will say that. I think that's cool. But then they have a hard time saying, well, why should I have that? And some of the ways that we've been doing that are writing. It helps me so we have a different series on YouTube where we talk about why Janus. We talk about engine size, design, all the different kind of facets that we're trying to kind of break down. We also, we use video a lot. We do surveys with our customers. We have owners rallies where we gather everybody together. We just try and foster that kind of environment. But I think the best way to describe it would be creating a vocabulary that folks can talk about what they're doing to their buddy with the bigger bike, or to their husband who doesn't necessarily think why would you buy a two-wheel vehicle, or whatever other reason. It's a kind of whether you see it as the poetry of motorcycling or the justification to your partner of it. Sure. All those things. And some of the ways we do that, I mentioned YouTube. That one of the things I think that is really another different thing about Janus is we don't have dealers. Okay. We're direct to consumer. We're looking for them, but it's for 10 plus years now, we've basically been able to sell directly to the consumer, help let them choose all these different options, and so YouTube and our ability to speak to folks and describe, create a language that we can talk about that is really important. In the last year or so, we started doing some podcasting, highlighting these concepts, talking to older riders, talking to industry folks, and what is it that's different? And then also, I started, it's been a year now, about 30 episodes into a Monday night rant. We call it the Ramble Stream, and it's just me. Either I'm doing design or just talking about a product or talking about a thing we've launched. And the folks that are on there are not really necessary. There are some new customers that are on there, or potential customers, leads, I don't know what you call them, but most of the folks on there are owners. Okay. And they're, I always get on there and I say, what are you sipping on? Where are you from? What's your name? What's your bike number? And people will chime in. And we got people from all over the country. Yeah. And then there are people that don't have a bike in England or Australia that are dialing in. And it's just a really fun way to do exactly what we kind of walk the walk, and kind of build back off of our ownership, that they have so much to teach us. Yeah, I love the way that you guys are engaging and interacting directly with your customers, and the fact that it's just a very humble way to say it. There's so much that they teach us and how we grow as a company and a brand, and that's really nice to hear.
two things that you had mentioned that I want to get into. One is you're not working with dealers right now. It's a direct to customer, direct to consumer relationship. And so what does that look like from a consumer? I decide, I've seen all your content, I'm in, I love what Janus is, I love rambling lifestyle, I want to get a bike. How do I do that?
Well, none of it would be possible without the internet. So a lot of folks will find us on YouTube or on social media, and then they'll the main thing we do is we say, give us a call, talk to us, and so that's what we really try and foster is a personal connection with people. But some folks will, if they want to, hey, I've looked at it, I get that all the time. I've watched every single video you have, and, but they've done that. They've gone down the rabbit hole. And then we have on our website, we have a configurator that we built. Then you can build any one of our bikes, and there's a lot of options. You can imagine hand pinstriped, we have dozens of colors you can choose from, leather options. So they can actually build out their bike and see what it looks like on that. And that's kind of usually the next step. Yeah. And then they can see what it costs. And then they can call in, or we can walk them through that. Of course, the best option is when folks will fly in or drive in and actually build the bike in person, see them. And it usually takes about 4 to 6 weeks for the motorcycle to be built. Yeah. And then it'll either be shipped to them or they can come pick it up.
Cool.
And ride it or trailer at home.
Oh, that's cool. That's a fun experience for sure. Then you had mentioned in your forums, when you're talking directly with current customers, that you ask them what their bike number is, and is that in the order of when they're manufactured? And so is there some pride in, well, I'm number 3, versus I'm number 800?
Yes.
Some pride in being an early adopter?
Absolutely. The serial number, we've kind of celebrated it, because it's really, because first of all, we're only making a couple of hundred a year, compared to bigger brands that are making hundreds of thousands in many cases. So one of the things we do is on every bike, we have historic motorcycles had a registration plate on the front fender, and that would have the registration like it would be on your. They didn't have license plates, and what we kind of saw that and thought, oh, that'd be a fun place to put something. And I thought, well, what if we put the serial number on the number plate? Now, not everyone opts for that, and some people opt to put their initials and the year they were born. But if it says JM dash, that's your serial number.
That's a serial number, okay.
And folks are really proud of that.
Sure.
And so you're given that serial number when you receive when you place the order. You're going to know what your serial number is. So a lot of folks are on there, like on the Ramble stream or something like, so, this is John from South Dakota. I got number whatever. Yeah. It's supposed to be built next week. I'm really excited. Nice. Yeah. Or whatever. And so, the serial numbers, we try and keep them model specific. Mm. So just for that reason, it's like, so if you have a Halcyon 250, you got number, at this point we're in the 1,000 and something at that,
It's just such a nice personal touch that people get really, inspired by, and a sense of pride.
I have number 68.
There you go.
I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So give us the whole spiel on rambling. What is rambling? Why is that so important to Janus? And we know that you are releasing a book.
Yes.
Coming out in hopefully a few weeks, available on Amazon. So talk to us about rambling.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about it, but rambling is the idea that, like I said, of getting from one place to another, but doing it for the journey, not necessarily to get there. One of the things I say is, when is the right time to arrive? Well, it's whenever you show up. Yeah. When you're on a Janus, at least. Yeah. Sometimes you need to get there on time, but rambling is the whole idea of the reason that most of us ride motorcycles in the first place, that we are going to enjoy the sights, the sounds, the smells, the conversations we have, sometimes the flat tires we get, or the rain. I talk about in the book the idea of fun number 1 versus fun number 2. Yeah. And fun number 1 is like eating a candy bar. It's like gratification. This is cool. It doesn't really do anything. Sometimes it actually maybe not the greatest idea. Fun number 2, on the other hand, is, let's say you get a flat tire and it's raining and it's night on a motorcycle. That's not very fun. But boy, is that a fun story. Yeah. And boy, do you not grow as a person when you've had to change that tire, and the pride you have in that, and that connection now you have with that motorcycle, or that place, or the person that came and helped you out. I don't know. That is what we're talking about with rambling.
I love it.
Yeah.
So the name of the book, The Rambler's Companion.
Yeah, it's called The Rambler's Companion, or The Art, Practice, Enjoyment, and Enjoyment of Lightweight Motorcycling. So it's kind of archaic sounding, but it's a little treatise or a manifesto on the kind of riding that we espouse. It kind of balances between manifesto and how-to.
Yeah, that's so cool. I can't wait to get a copy
Absolutely.
of that and take a look. Last question. How do you hope Janus Motorcycles leaves an impact on the world?
Oh, that's a good one. Lots of good questions. The impact that I would hope that Janus leaves on the world is that we can have a machine that is human-centered.
Human-centered, yeah.
Like so many of the machines that the technology that drives us, that really is, I would say, in many cases, out of our control. It's literally driving us now.
Yeah.
We're following little commands. So much of it is sort of out of our control that I think that the motorcycle, and particularly the kind of extreme example of the motorcycle that we espouse, is an antidote. And it's one of the only machines I can name. Maybe a mechanical watch is another one. It's a great example.
Yeah.
That it has more value than just the sum of its parts, and you can have an attachment to it. You can I would hope bequeath it to your next generation.
Sure.
And it's something that has meaning in and of itself, and that you are in control of, that you pilot.
Yeah.
It's an aid to you. So that would be my hope.
I love it. I mean, that's really nice. That's really nice. Well, Richard, thanks so much for being with us here today. Really appreciate the conversation. Very insightful on how you built and founded this brand, and love the way you describe you cultivate relationships and connections and communications with your customers. Really great story, so we would truly appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Of course. And thanks to all of you for listening in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow The Mindful Bullhorn on your favorite podcast platforms. And please check out Richard's new book, The Rambler's Companion, when it comes out on Amazon later this month. Thanks all. We'll see you on the next one.